In this video, we're going to be talking about Control Tilde menu, and this may be slightly confusing because when you have nothing selected or nothing in a scene, the menu has only one option here, and if you add something to the scene, suddenly you got a lot of them. And also this top tab here, General, right? It's not here when you don't have anything in a scene. So let's just add something and let's talk about this menu from the top, okay? Now, all these options in this top menu, okay, in this context menu, that's all HardOPS, and we're gonna discuss all of them, okay? The rest is all Blender vanilla, right? They just bunched up in a different way. So here, for example, you got transform, dimensions, relations, right? Viewport display, which by the way, some of them are here, right? Like view and dimensions. If I'm gonna click on a cube, you will see that on the item, we're gonna have, transform and dimensions. Then the viewport display, for example, and relation is going to be here, right? And then you have viewport display. So these are sort of the most important things you usually would be, kind of opening in order to set things up. So they're kind of bunched up in a convenient way here. So if you want to work here, work here. If you want to work here in Blender Vanilla, then, do that. This one is the same one as this one, constraint. Then this one, although it's the same thing, it's just modifier tab. I actually prefer to use Blender one because, let me show you. So if I add a bevel and, whatever, like a cutter here, I got a stack of modifiers, especially with this, extension modifier tools and with the, this, old modifier menu enabled, it's actually, I think, better to use, this menu here because first of all I can toggle them on and off. I can turn them on and off in viewport. I can also slide them like this, which you can't do in here. You need to use the arrows, which is a bit 1975. Now the difference is that in here you're gonna have different, the modifier is gonna be displayed differently. The cool thing is that if you open the modifier here, you can see that it's gonna open here as well. But the display of modifier itself, we can see the data is different here and here, yeah? So this could be more convenient for you to work with. Like for example, if I go to bevel, I don't have to open these tabs to access my profile, geometry, shading, I just click here and it just pops, yeah? So, it's a matter of preference, but I actually prefer this menu because again, I can slide stuff if I have to, okay? Next is gonna be this tab, which is, data tab, which is the same as this one, right? Nothing new. And this one is the last one. Now, the last one, there's one difference that you have this here on the bottom, right? Cutting material. It's the same thing as this one here, right? And it's gonna work the same way. I already showed it to you, but I'm gonna show it again. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the D menu for box cutter section of this course. So let's slap a mud here, different mud to all of them. And I'm going to go to this Control Tilde menu and I'm going to select this color, which is 02, right, as a cutter. And I can either use box cutter to cut with this color, or I can use HardOPS to use, to cut with this color. But it's gonna work the same way if you're gonna set it up in box cutter, so it doesn't really matter. You see that? So if I go to D menu, right, and now I'm going to switch it to 001, right? So I'm using a different menu, it's gonna revert, right? And I can again use HardOPS to do the same thing. So it doesn't matter which menu you're gonna use. I think easier is to use the D menu because you're gonna be working in the menu quite a lot, right? So see what I mean? It's just the same thing. But anyway, that's what it's for, okay? So now let's go back and just grab a cube, and also let me just close this end panel so it doesn't really bother us. Let's talk about all these options here, right? Now, first one on top is gonna be general, right? Now, this one is gonna be referring to this object, this cube 004, right? And you can, shade it smooth, flat. Here you can parent things. So, for example, I mean, I wouldn't be using this, and there's a reason for it because when I have something moved, it's transformed, which means I moved it in a space, so its location is different than this one. This one is 000. So when I'm gonna parent this one to this one, it's gonna actually move to this location. If you want to parent stuff properly, you want to click and shift click, and you want to press Control P, and you want to click on this one, Object Keep Transform. So they're gonna stay in their respective positions. But anyway, moving on. So shade smooth, flat, and then you can add auto smooth, which is gonna add a modifier right now, right? which is pointless, because why would you want to do that if you can simply, you know, go here and just run a bevel and cancel it, right? It's quicker, you know what I mean? Like you can just start the bevel and cancel it with right mouse button. If you just want to add smooth by angle, it's quicker. I don't have to go to Control Tilde, open this thing, you know, look for this, you know, option. It's just pointless in my opinion. Then you can, you know, show wire or show all wires. You can do the same thing with, you know, with Q settings and just simply show the wire. You can also voxelize it. I don't know why would you want to do that, but you know, you can, right? So you can just voxelize it, and you can obviously change the number, I mean the density of voxelization. Let me just add a cube here, right? So you can change the size of, you know, of the quads that the cube's gonna be voxelized with. I never use this menu, okay, even once. Next one, workflow. It's interesting. So here you can choose whether you want to work destructively or non-destructively. Now, this is going to be different for box cutter. If I'm going to select this option, destructive, and click OK, and I'm going to run a cut with a box cutter, it will not get applied because my behavior here is set to non-destructive in box cutter menu. Again, we're going to talk about this menu in advanced section. However, if I'm going to run the same cut with HardOPS boolean, right? So this one, it will get applied, right? Boom. Okay. So, you know, set it the way you want it. I never set it to destructive because I want my booleans to be live, because that allows me to, you know, adjust the shape later on. This one will, you know, tell Blender what solver you want to work with, and solver basically, if you still don't know what it is, you should by now, is the way you run modifiers, I mean the boolean. So if I'm going to run a difference, you see, with a fast solver, it will not work. But if I'm going to switch this boolean here to exact, it will, okay? So in tricky situations when your booleans don't go through, there could be some issues with, for example, surfaces of the cutter laying very close or overlapping with the surface of the, you know, object you're cutting. You need to then switch to exact. I wouldn't really recommend switching it permanently to exact here, because one, you don't need exact modifiers in 99% of cases, and two, it's gonna slow down your the FPS in your viewport, so don't do it, especially when you have a lot of bevels, okay? Next one, I never really fiddle with this, but I'm gonna tell you what it is. It's basically, you can set here how and if HardOPS gonna set, you know, sort modifiers, and you can do the same thing for box cutter, okay? And these, by the way, are for cutters, all right? So these are cutter modifiers. Anyway, so modifiers running on cutters. I think I showed it to you with a example of this circle set to modifier, right? And we ran a modifier, and there was a screw on it. You can, you know, and we enabled it so we could actually see that. So the modifier wasn't really applied, it was actually, you know, listed as a modifier on the cutter. Anyway, rewatch this video on the D menu section, you'll know what I'm talking about. By the way, going back here, no, by default, you know, these are modifiers that are going to be sorted. And I really wouldn't fiddle with this. I mean, you could enable solidify if you wanted to for specific reasons, but other than that, I wouldn't touch this. You definitely want to keep it on, because otherwise you're going to be in a world of pain, unless you're doing something very, very specific and you do not want modifiers to be sorted, okay? That's a depth, which means, you know, how many modifiers are going to get sorted. Then you can flag modifiers to be ignored. But let me add the modifiers. I'm going to show you a bit more about them, okay? So let me add the bevel, and you're going to see a bit more options. Actually, I'm not, which is interesting. Hang on, that's 4.0. Let me go to 4.3, because something is missing over there. That's better. Okay, so you can see all these flags that are, you know, sometimes added to modifiers. Like, for example, sort type last. You see the exclamation mark? If I'm going to go to 4.2, for example, I'm going to run a smooth by angle, then you're going to see something interesting. So let me just run a bevel and go to modifiers. Not this one, 4.1. One of these blenders had this kind of prefix to the modifier, and that was added by HardOPS, and it indicates it's going to be, you know, sorted last. Boom, see that? Exclamation marks. And auto smooth is going to be always sorted last, at least it should be. In this case it doesn't work correctly, but anyway, that's what it means. So, you know, it's a modifier sorting order, and you definitely don't want to mess with this one, all right? But you can set here to, for example, bevels to ignore bevel weight, or V groups, which is vertex groups. As you know that, for example, the bevel weight modifier applies vertex group, like we talked about the mark tool, right? Control click on mark, which is gonna add a vertex group, right? So this is gonna be a vertex group based limit method right here. See that? So you can ignore that with modifiers. That's a really advanced workflow. If you know really what you're doing and you're doing it purposefully, go for it. But if you don't touch it, okay? Next one, this one is important. We've been here many times, you know what it is. It's basically attributes that are set by default that are gonna be applied to all the sharp edges above 30 degrees, which is set by default, and I would suggest you leave it at 30. That's what HardOPS is gonna apply. Now, personally, I just turned them off because honestly, I don't need any of these. I don't need crease, I don't need B-weight, I don't need sharp, I don't need anything. I just need this to, apply my modifiers. Because if you do have this on, right, and you're gonna, for example, run this dirty smart apply I told you about, right, remember? So let's run a boolean and let's just mirror this, right? And I'm gonna go to sharpen control click. All these bloody edges gonna get applied. I don't need them, right? What I need is just the modifiers to be applied. So usually I turn this, all these things off. If I need something to work, like I need B-weight on some edges, I'll just turn it on. It's easier. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to remove all these if I don't need them. Especially now that when you apply smooth by, this one, smooth by angle, when this shit is applied, now, like I told you, recent update to HardOPS, thankfully they listened to me and they just set up that smart apply ignores this one, right? But in previous versions it was actually applying the smooth. Actually, this one is applying because it's 4.2 perfect. So when I'm gonna go to the edit mode, you see I got these hard edges. It's really irritating. So what you could set it up to, you could set it to sharp, because then all you need to do is go to edit mode, select everything Q and unmark, and you're good to go. So even if your mesh gets, these applied, you're fine. But in a new Blender, 4.4 whatever, the new update ignores this modifier, right? So if I'm going to go here and, run a cut and weighted normals and mirror, whatever, and I'm gonna smart apply this, right? We have the smooth by angle here in the bottom, you see? So watch, boom, and smooth apply isn't applied. So I have no edge markings or attributes on my mesh, which means I can turn all this rubbish off, right? So that's what I suggest you do, but you do you. Next one's gonna be auto smooth, and that's default value. Leave it at default, don't touch it. Remember that when you have auto smooth at 60, you wanna change it, you can go to Q, sharpen, hold shift, and you can adjust it very easily, right? You see it sliding left and right. So do it this way, okay? Don't mess with the default settings for HardOPS because they set that, like that for a reason, right? So unless you really know what the hell you're doing, I'm telling you right now. So, don't mess with these things. Now, next one's gonna be mesh clean. This one, and also dice. Mesh clean is the tool here. This one, right? Clean mesh. So these options here would apply to clean mesh, which means which object to clean, mesh on, whether it's visible, all of them, whereas it's active or selected, right? And then you have the limited dissolve angle, which you can obviously change, because if you go to clean mesh, right? Okay, you can unroll this menu, it's the same menu, right? Then you can set, how many passes you want this to run. So you can have 1 pass, 2 passes, just like in render, okay? So it's gonna clean mesh once, twice, And then this one, I have no idea what it is actually on hide mesh, but this one is gonna help you delete interior faces, which is quite important. Remember we had this problem with the 360, so on the mesh tools, and we ran it, right? And when we applied it, remember we had these faces in the middle, right? Here, these, okay. By default, faces will not get cleaned, right? Interior faces. But if I select this and click OK and run clean mesh on this one, right? It's gonna actually clean these faces. So you might want to turn it on. But again, remember, this is running based on a limited dissolve. So you need to make sure that it's not gonna dissolve too much of your geometry, okay? So again, be careful. But you could turn it on by default. I think it's gonna be a bit better. This one is for dice, which is gonna tell dice what kind of tools you wanna use. By default is knife project, right? You could also intersect it. But knife project is gonna be, I think, a better choice because that's what you want to do with dice. You want, you know, a grid of lines to be projected onto your mesh. So, you know, go to Q and then you go to dice, V, and you scroll and, you know, and you dice. And that's what you get. It's a knife project, right? They are physical edges projected onto the mesh. Now, this one you can change to, for example, Smart Apply, which is going to apply all the modifiers. You don't want to do that, okay? Because if you have modifiers running on your mesh, you want to keep them live. Then you can change the, you know, how these lines from dice look and whether the wires from this animation are fading or not. Bevel, that's important. So you want to leave it on angle, obviously, because bevel weight, you're not going to be running on bevel weight by default unless you are running weight limit method based bevels. Then sure, switch it. This one too, you don't want to turn it on because you can do it with N key. So, you know, go to bevel and press N for hardened normals. And like I told you, hardened normals is maybe 5% of meshes, and the weighted normal is going to sort out 95% of meshes. You know, the shading. So you don't want to really touch it and turn it on by default because there's a lot of cases it will not work, okay? So leave it. You can turn it on with hotkeys. And then that's a default profile. Now this one is a bit different than default Blender Vanilla because that one is at 0.5. So if you go to bevel here and profile, you see 0.5 and HardOPS is at 0.7. I don't know why, don't ask me, but you know, I just don't touch it and it's fine. And then you have segments and adaptive. This one's going to dynamically adapt or segment count during beveling depending on the size of the bevel. Okay. Now you're not going to be able to see this because when I'm going to start beveling, bevel going to collapse. But if I'm going to go higher, you can see on the bottom segment 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you see? It's dynamically increasing the number of segments based on the curvature it requires to create a smooth bevel. So that's what it's for, okay? I don't really use it. I want to have a full control over this bevel. And then you got arc and sharp for miter, outer, and inner. Do not touch this. That's what's making this, you know, bevel so great. Remember that the miter inner, the miter outer set to sharp. It's what Vanilla Blender does by default, and it's terrible. Because what's happening is that when you have a corner like this, you're gonna get this rubbish, right? See that? You need to go in here and go to geometry and switch it to arc, yeah? And this one important. You know, loop slide is a tool that really allows you to, or allows us to use HardOPS in a way that doesn't really mess up our shading on beveled areas. Because watch this, if I had this one, right, and I just grab this and press F, and then grab these and press F. And I'm going to grab this edge here and run it like that. And nuke this one, right? And then watch this. If I'm going to bevel this, right, like that, you see what happens? When I pull the bevel, it's going to, the edge is going to stay, you know, stay still, but the bevel is going to be literally collapsing on itself, kind of flipping under the mesh because it slides. So you want to unroll this option here and turn off loop slide, yeah? That's what it does. So when you're running an automated bevel with HardOPS, and the loop slide is off, you're gonna have all kinds of shading problems. So you're gonna be in a world of pain because it's a dynamic bevel. It's a modifier, so you cannot adjust the verts. You see what I mean? So you wanna keep it on, okay? Just don't touch it, right? And then you got jump to bevel on C# and remove cutters. This is basically for C#. No one is using it. Remember the C# and no one is using it. So just move on and leave it alone. Next one, booleans. Well, here when you use step, it's gonna get properly sorted in a stack. Do not touch this, especially when you're gonna be working with bevel step. And you know what it is when you have, we talked about this, right? Remember when there's a bevel in a mesh, and then you run a boolean, right? And then you want to run another boolean. You see, like we set it this to freaking sharp, and now it's a problem. Okay, let me just apply this. There you go. See what happens? That happens. Say it one more time, and I'm going to run a boolean, right? And then I want to run step, right? So step, boom, and that's what it's for. Okay, so don't touch it if you want to be using it. Then you got parent bool shapes. You can parent bool shapes with HardOPS because by default, and I suggest you do that. By default, these cutters, right, are parented. You see that? If I move the cube, the cutter moves. But HardOPS cutters are not. Now, if you turn it on, there will be, you see? There will be. But if you turn it off, there won't be. So I would suggest you turn it on And it's easier to work like this, because when you move the mesh, resize, when you move the mesh, resize the mesh, whatever, rotate, they're gonna move with the mesh. So unless that's something you don't want, turn it on, right? C#, I don't care. The cutter is gonna get removed on C# or Smart Apply. I really wouldn't recommend this. Basically, what's gonna happen is that if you're going to, run a cutter, and then you're going to have this, turned on, upon Smart Apply, it's going to apply this boolean and remove the cutter from the cutter collection. It's going to delete that wireframe completely. So watch, right? Boom, and cutter is gone. Maybe sometime later on you want to reuse that cutter on a different place in your mesh or different object, and you can't get it because it's gone. So I wouldn't touch it really. No one cares about C#. Moving on. Keep bevel on what? Oh yeah, when you boolean, obviously you want to keep bevel when you're booleaning, because that would be stupid if you didn't. Now the last one is going to be, hang on, let me just collapse this. This one, the opt-in and out menu, is literally the same one as this one, right? And we're gonna be talking about it in advanced section, because, to be honest, you don't have to touch or understand anything out of this except for what I told you in the beginner section. Do not touch these, okay? Some of these are very old settings. Some of these are very, very specific, like for example, where was it? This one, array type 2D, 3D. That's just for 3D mouse. Who the hell is using 3D mouse, except Elon Musk? Do you know what I mean? So anyway, that's all for this menu. That's all you need to know, really. That's that simple. And in the last video, in this section, we're going to talk about some of these tools here, and that will cover everything and much more that you need to know about HardOPS tools and menus for literally 99.9% of things you're going to be doing with HardOPS, okay? So, with all this knowledge, you are ready to dive into the practical section of this course, which is going to be modeling. So we're going to be using all the tools in conjunction with one another, and you'll see how little you need in order to create some really badass stuff, okay? So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.